Hey, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Good to have you here as always. So tonight, part one of a talk with Jesse Chaos. Jesse was one of the founders of Hayward Skins, and he was a Bay Area skinhead original. Now, if you know anything about the American skinhead culture, you'll know about Bay Area skinheads. Yeah, Gilman Street, all that kind of stuff. Jesse was there. So tonight in part one, Jesse shares his life story about growing up in the Bay Area and how he became a skinhead and the formation of the Hayward Skins. So let's get into it. As part one. Hey Jesse, welcome back to the channel for a third time now. I think we've done this, but good to have you here, mate. And I'm going to let you just introduce yourself and tell the world your story, mate. So
I was born in San Francisco, California. I was born on a Friday the 13th. It was a full moon. So I came in on an interesting sign. We lived in San Francisco. I think I was about 4, maybe. Well, let's see, probably 3 or 4 when we moved to Hayward. And that's Hayward is in the East Bay. It's south of Oakland by about 10 minutes. So it's kind of like it's considered the heart of the Bay. So it's where it sits. It's like, right across the bay from San Mateo, which is just south of San Francisco. They call it the heart of the Bay, but it's more like the armpit of the Bay, really. There's a lot of gangs. I mean, it's not as bad as it used to be, but throughout the 80s and the 90s, I guess it got really bad in the 90s with the gangs. It seemed like something was going on, and I guess in the entire country with that. Mm. Statistically, it has one of the highest crime rates in the United States per capita and all that stuff. When you factor it in, it's got top of the list. So it's pretty unassuming place. There's not a whole lot going on here as far as like anything that would attract people to come. There's like nothing really going on here that people are flocking to experience. Right. It's really just kind of like a lot of people that were working class. I think it was similar. It came up as Paramount, I think, in Southern California. It was a little bit less than Compton. It wasn't as bad as Compton, but it was. I think Paramount was what it showed. When I grew up here, there's a lot of back when I was a kid, the demographics were it was probably 60% white. The rest were pretty much Chicanos. We had a lot of Chicanos here, which are, for people that don't know, those are American-born Mexicans. Okay. So like their parents may have been migrants or their grandparents were migrants, and then they were born here in the States. Okay. So they're American citizens by birth. But they were really proud people. They you don't hear too much about them anymore. I don't know if it's just because they're getting overtaken by the actual migrants, and but they were at that time. They were really their presence was known. And they were proud of that. So I went to school with a lot of Chicano kids, and one of the things that I remember being really fascinated by them because the way that they all dressed the same. They had style for one thing, and they stuck together. They stuck up for one another, and it just was foreign to me from what I was used to seeing. Right. And so I always had like kind of I don't know if it was, maybe I wouldn't call it envy, but there was something about it that I like felt like I was missing out, kind of, So I'm being raised like my parents are straight up from the Haight-Ashbury, like second generation San Franciscans, all about the whole liberal, 60s counterculture, summer love shit coming off of, so everything that you can think of that is related to that type of those politics, like the feminism and just the anti-racism and all that stuff, all that was beaten into my head from the time I was a kid, Right. And I'm an only child. I have 2 first cousins that are like my sisters, because we're always lived within close proximity of each other. But, I just remember early on the politics, and then the religious wise was they were into comes from the New Age religion. It's called Theosophy. I don't know if you're familiar.
No.
Helen Blavatsky was the one chick, and then there was like a rogue chick that like broke off, and they started their own thing, and her name was Alice Bailey, and they have like, it's similar but it's not the same, and that was what my parents were all into. They were a part of that. Like they call it a school, but their church or whatever, they were members, and so early on I was, it was kind of there was a sentiment in my family that I would say it was definitely anti-Christian.
Okay.
I mean, there was definitely an animosity towards Christian people that I didn't quite understand what it was really, where it came from, but that was something I remember. Very, very like anti-racist. Like, you say the N-word in my house, you're gonna get slapped. I mean, that's all there's. One thing I do remember is that my dad was never really held to any high regard or anything. Okay. Like the men in my family, it was definitely a matriarchy. You know what I'm saying? The men in my family were always kind of like looked down upon. They talked shit about them. They were like just a bunch of drunks, and there was always something that they were doing wrong. So it was all, there's always that too. So growing up, there was always an animosity and like a resentment towards men in my family that, they probably wouldn't agree, but it's just something that I remember growing up. I mean, to the point that when my mom and dad split up, there was so much resentment that was visibly, shown by my mom towards my dad, that when she kicked him out or whatever happened in between, I remember being relieved almost that he was gone.
Oh, wow.
Really, I remember that day when she told me that he was gone and he wasn't coming back, that it almost felt like that was a good thing. Then maybe she could be happy, I guess. I don't know. But it was nothing shocking to me at all. Like, it was like a totally, like, my reaction to it, I remember, was just the opposite of what anybody would have expected of a kid. You know what I mean? It didn't faze me at all. It was almost like I said, I was just like, okay, he's gone. I guess, me and him were never super close. I mean, but he was there, but he just was never, I don't know if it was that he wasn't interested in being a father and not really having, like, it seemed like he didn't have anything in the mix. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't have any skin in the game, it seemed like. Right. Like, he really wasn't trying to really raise me and like to be in any certain kind of way. It was just a real hands-off approach. And the boomers were kind of like that. They had a general, like, hands-off approach when it came to raising the kids. They would pretty much let us raise ourselves. Yeah. I mean, we spent our entire lives outside. Like, we just had to be home when the street lights, when they came on, that we knew that was time to go home. And that was it. Yep. They never asked us where we were, what we were doing. Like, they really just didn't give a shit. So it was like that. I mean, but because of that, our lives were, when we were kids, we did some adventurous shit, man. We did a lot of stuff that, like, these kids nowadays, I mean, they probably call CPS for letting the kids do it, I mean, I remember we had, like, a rope swing that thing, like, you could have died if you would have fell off of it. But that was just what we did. Like, we were having a blast, rode our bikes everywhere. Like, it was just a different time. I mean, so it was, my childhood was, basically, there was nothing traumatic about it. There was a lot of alcohol. Okay. A lot of drinking, a lot of loud music. I remember growing up. My uncle was kind of a rowdy guy. My uncle would be more of like he would assume that role in my life as my main role model, so to speak. Yeah. Because my dad really was empty boots when it came to that. And then, he left. My mom kicked him out when I was in the 5th grade. And then my uncle kind of stepped in and, like, took me under his wing. And, so I started doing a lot of stuff with him, like, and he was like gun nut. He was all about guns, and he had all kinds of guns. And so he would take me shooting. We go shooting. And that was, to me, that was a blast. Yeah, I mean, I loved doing that. Because he had, like, every type of assault rifle you could think of. My gun I had an Uzi. That was me, and I could, like, I could take it apart, put it back together, blindfolded and shit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like I was raised around guns. Like the guns are like nothing. Like to me, they're just it's a non-issue. It's nothing. You know, I don't get excited about them. You know, people show me their guns and stuff. I'm just like, yeah, I've shot that. You know what I mean? I've seen it. Since I was doing that when I was in the 5th grade, that's what I was doing.
Yeah, wow.
You know, so it was really cool, like with that, you know, with my uncle being there. I mean, you're glad that he was there, but you know, nobody was getting abused in our family. You know, just the occasional, you know, there were fights between the men. Like I do remember from an early age, like, you know, my uncle, my dad and his brothers got in a fight one night at my uncle's house, and my uncle came out and beat my dad up and busted his head open. There's blood everywhere. And like my cousins, like they would tell you about that stuff, and because they were the ones that had to clean up the blood and that stuff, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So they were a little more traumatized, and, you know, being their girls, they probably, you know, would have a lot more to say that was negative towards their father than I have to say,
right,
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because, you know, because he did fight. Like I remember, you know, one Christmas going out there, and he had just knocked my grandpa into the Christmas tree. My grandpa's sitting on, got knocked on his ass, literally, you know, with tinsel on his head. You know, this is his dad. He's fighting his dad, you know, and that kind of shit happened. You know, and for me, it just was like, you know, that's just what happens. Like, I didn't see it as being abnormal or anything different than anybody else. When it happened, when like I had friends over though, that's when I got more conscious of it. Like then it was like, okay, how is this for them? You know what I mean? Because they probably don't see this shit at their house. Maybe they do, I don't know. But that was the only time that it really kind of bothered me, was when somebody else was there to witness it. Because I'm thinking about how they're feeling, you know? But I don't ever feel like I just wasn't with the trauma and the PTSD and stuff like that. Like, I didn't realize that I was being affected in that way from that violence. Mm-hmm. But I was around violence all my life. And then as a kid going to school, I was around violence. There was violence all the time. It was just that way. And where I grew up, like the way my parents, you know, with their new age religious stuff, you know, the way they were trying to raise me, I should have turned out to be like this super hardcore leftist, you know, like just that guy, you know, but I didn't. And it all like backfired. And then my dad never taught me how to defend myself. I was told that fighting was wrong. So, you know, I go to school and I'm like this timid little kid that really, he doesn't have a whole lot of self-confidence. You know, like a lot of my self-esteem was like wrapped up my mom and stuff. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So without, you know, like any time that I was like, I would go try to spend a night at someone's house or something. Like I remember going to people's houses, but then calling her and getting picked up and not staying there, you know, like because I didn't like to be without my mom around. Oh. You know what I'm saying? So it was like that kind of shit growing up. So going into this environment, like if we had lived like somewhere where there's no crime and, you know, everyone gets along, it would have been a different story. But you send a boy to school and you're not even, and especially around here, and you haven't taught him how to defend himself, you know, he's going to have problems, you know? Yeah. But the thing with me is that for whatever reason in my head, I felt like I should be able to defend myself. Like it always bothered me that like I was afraid to like fight somebody. Like it made me crazy. I couldn't stand the feeling of that. Wow. You know? So I went through, you know, it took me a while to really break out of that. It's just being just exposed to those kind of people and being around violent other kids that were like violent like that. Because I went to school with, like I said, when I was in elementary school, it was mostly Chicano kids, and they were a little more laid back. They still would bully. There were some bullies that would go around and stuff, and they always, you know, there was always a group of them. There was never just like one. When I was in the 4th grade, I changed schools and I went into a school where it was like a lot of black kids. They would bus them in from another neighborhood. And so we had every morning there was a busload of the black kids that came. And that was when I started really noticing like the violence and the racism too. Okay. Because for whatever reason, I was really aware from an early point that I was a white boy. Okay. I was taught that racism is just unacceptable. You know what I mean? There's no reason to be that way. So I'm going to school, and that's not necessarily being reciprocated. You know, so I'm not. I'm being like, I don't have any prejudice against anybody at all, none whatsoever. I'll be a friend. I had friends of all different races and stuff, but I did notice with like the black kids and some of the other kids, but not as much. There was a underlying racism there that I was always treated differently because I was a white boy, and that was made clear. You know what I mean? And we went to a field trip up to the Steinhardt Aquarium over in San Francisco, and I remember there was some schools from Oakland there, and at the same time as we were there. And the thing about Oakland is like at that time, there wasn't hardly any white people there. So these kids, they're going to school. They're not really seeing a whole lot of white kids. Yeah. So when they went to on this field trip, here's a school that has a bunch of white kids from the suburbs. So these guys, in Oakland breeds another kind of knucklehead. I mean, it's like if you're from Oakland, you're from Oakland, right? But if you're from Hayward, you're not from Oakland. Right. And it goes like Oakland is like has a status above as far as like street credibility. And like if you're from Oakland, that means something. You know what I mean? That gives you like automatic rank, over everybody else. But it's not a big thing. It's like a real thing. That it's just a natural selection hierarchy type thing. You know what I mean? They're just way more dominant and aggressive than the other kids were. So we're at this field trip, and I remember these guys, kids from Oakland. There's like 3 or 4 of them. They just started kicking the shit out of one of the kids from my class. Well, it was some white dude, and I just remember them saying they're like, "Oh, let's go find us another white boy to beat up." You know what I mean? And that was like the first time that I really ever experienced anything like that. And I was just like, you kind of like, was it? I didn't really know what to think about it. But as years would go by, I mean, you'd see more and more of it. And as I got older, it was, and I had a lot of friends that were black. When I get into junior high school, one of my best friends actually, he would grow up to become a famous rapper from Hayward. And there's only one rapper from Hayward, so it's not hard to figure out who that is. But we got involved with the breakdancing thing. So because I never had access to punk rock for whatever, like that shit was like non-heard of. Like I didn't even know that I remember when the Sex Pistols came to the United States, because it was in the news. It was like in the papers and stuff. Like it was a big thing. That was the first thing that I've ever heard about punk rock, and then that was the last thing that I heard about punk rock for years and years to come. I just didn't have any access. Nobody in my family were listening to it. We didn't have any relatives or anything that were listening to it. I didn't go to school with any kids that were listening to it, at least, not that I knew of, So it just wasn't there. But what I did have access to was hip hop. And that was happening. And I just happened to be where I got involved into that a little earlier than most people before it blew up. So I got I was breakdancing, had kind of a head start. And, so I was better than average. You know what I mean? I was for that time. And so my partner in that was the guy that became a rapper. We did that. And, plus, I got a lot of shit for that because I was like one of the first white kids that was crossing over and actually interacting with the blacks, you know what I mean? That. Like things were still really segregated. They weren't, but there were still those groups really, there was some, there was a lot, it wasn't really integrated as much as it probably is now.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, people still stuck, there was racism, but it wasn't anything organized, or it was just kind of racial slurs and stuff like that.
So where do you think was the turning point? Because as you became a skinhead, you became involved with the skinheads, but you think with that kind of early influences with the hip hop and the rap and the breakdancing, there must have been something pretty significant to change.
Well, see, but that's the thing. I didn't really change anything.
Okay.
In it because my motivations were never about hatred or any type of animosity or prejudice against any other races.
Okay.
That was the way I saw it to me, it was, here's a white gang, okay, that I could be a part of, and I could stick up, I could stand up for myself and be white. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that was really what it was, more than anything. Like, I saw myself, I kind of saw, I mean, if you want to get technical about it, like, I saw us as the anti-racist, because we were, standing up against the racism that we were experiencing. Mm-hmm. And that's, like, I never saw that as anything wrong.
Yeah.
Now, I know there were other people that were involved that had different motivations, but one thing that I can say, like, out of the people that were, like, the ones that came around that were really, really, just vehemently racist, that were there obviously because they had hatred to express. Okay. And they were using the skinhead vehicle to do that. A lot of those guys, they didn't stick around for very long. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them became anti-racist.
Wow.
That's the irony. The guys that I can remember that became anti-racist, like Joint Sharp or whatever, a lot of them were the most racist people that we had, because we really didn't, like, I don't know, we just didn't, I don't know, we were just kind of above that in a way. Yeah. Like, when we were together and we were hanging out, like, just the leaders at that time, like, we weren't really, that's not what it was about. Okay. Like, we went around, like, and talk shit about fucking non-whites, like, and go out, like, especially, like, the whole bullshit about fucking, like, going out and, like, hunting down non-white people and stuff like that. We never did anything like that. That's not what was going on at all. Like, that wasn't my experience that I experienced. It ain't nothing like that. We had better things to talk about. I mean, that's just, that, like I said, like, for me, it was just, when I saw the Skinheads, I was like, wow, like, because there was no other gangs that I could join. The blacks weren't taking, that was one thing, because I was around a lot of blacks for a certain couple of years of my life, and I never was accepted by them. I was okay to hang out with them, and they would hang out with me and drink fucking 40s and beer and stuff like that, and smoke pot and do whatever. But I was never, like, really allowed past a certain point. Sure. I was always kept, I was always reminded that, I'm a white boy. Because of that, I mean, I did have to stand up for myself a lot. There was a lot of people testing me. They weren't necessarily, pushing me around and stuff, because I did stand up for myself and I did have that respect. But I still, I got sick of just, always, being that white boy. You know what I mean? Like, I got sick of that. And that was one of the things that, like, made me start distancing myself. And that happened way before I became skinhead. It was a couple of years before that. Like, I started drifting away from that. But there was intention there. I just remember one day having an epiphany, and I was in the shower, and it just dawned on me. It's like, like, what are you doing? Like, that inner voice was like, you're never going to be accepted. You can't. They're not going to allow you. You can't become one of them. Mm-hmm. So what are you doing? Like, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just going with the flow. Like I said, I didn't really have, like, anybody to look up to to emulate and aspire to be like. Yep. So it's really kind of like a kid in a boat with no sail and no paddles. And I was just kind of going wherever I was going, no direction, and just, finally at some point I was just like, that inner voice kind of smacked me upside my head, just like, what are you doing? Do you know? And I didn't know. I had no one to tell me. And, so it was just a trip. Like, so that was part of the process of becoming a skinhead. I'd never heard of skinheads. When I went to high school with some guys, and I hung out with some guys that, would tell me about it. It all kind of sounded kind of corny to me, the way they were described. Okay. But the thing was, they weren't described very well.
Okay.
Because there was a lot of shit that got left out of it, because when the first time I saw Skinheads, it was a whole different experience. What happened was, it's me and there's this dude, he's kind of a somewhat semi-famous person. His name's Eric Hogan. Rancid song "Time Bomb." It was written about him.
Black coat, white shoes, black hat, Cadillac, yeah. The boy's a time bomb.
That's about him. So me and him were best friends. So me and Eric, we hook up. Like we had we built a skateboard ramp up in this guy's house, and Eric and his friend Noel showed up. And I met him when I think he was probably in the 7th grade, maybe, and I was in the 8th. So no, it was like he was in the 8th, I was in the 9th. And then when I was in the 10th grade, I started hanging out with him. And we mainly just going and cut class and smoking dope and shit. I got kicked out, and he went to continuation school. So for the rest of that year, I really didn't see him. I think I remember seeing him one time. But what happened was the next year, he got back into the school, and they allowed him back in for a semester or whatever. Well, for whatever reason, when we started talking, we hit it off. We were, it was just like, I don't know what it was. It was just like just partners in crime from that point on, right? And we were just off and running. We didn't go to school much, sold drugs. We were all over the place. We had our skateboards. And we'd go to Berkeley, go to San Francisco. We were just running around. And so he would tell me about the punk shows, And then we had a couple punk rock tapes. That was the first time I started listening to punk rock. And, I felt like, I shouldn't like this music. Like, there was something, it was totally new and foreign to me. But it was awesome. It was just the opposite. Like, I was like, this shit's badass. Like, I don't know what I've been, like, fuck all that, the rap and shit that I've been, you know what I mean? That stuff's nothing compared to this. And it spoke to me. So I really kind of was fond of it right off. And so he's telling me about punk shows, and I'm hearing about the mosh pit, right? And the mosh pit, the way they're describing it to me, it sounds absolutely terrifying. Like, the first time someone told me about a mosh pit, it was a metalhead dude. And he's telling me about how the metal shows at the mosh pit, how people are getting their heads busted open, and guys with their spiked jackets, and they're just fucking mashing spikes, and it sounded horrible. I'm like, that don't sound like fun. I mean, why do that, dude? Like, but so that was my impression of what that was all about. So what happened was there was a show. It was going to be a DRI show at the Mabuhay Gardens in San Francisco, and his mom and dad, they worked for Amtrak. His mom had a job out there at the Oakland station, the West Oakland station, the Amtrak, pulling the weeds, picking up the trash, just cleaning up the yard there, right? So we went out there, and we were going to get the money that we made from that. We were going to shoot over to the city, go to the show, and it was, it's going to be awesome. It was my first show. Like, I have no idea what to expect. You know what I'm saying? So we do that, we get our money, and we go to the show. I'm really totally oblivious to what's going on. If you've ever been to a punk show, like, when the band starts playing, people start kind of like getting up and going on the dance floor, and like going towards the stage, and there's like a circle starts to form, and it's just waiting for the first person or first people to get in the pit and start that pit. So one guy gets in, then two more guys get in, and it's just a matter of like who's going to start it. And so everyone's standing around like waiting for that to happen. Two skinheads come walking through right in the middle of the circle, and I'm looking at these guys, and they're like, a little bit older than us, but they're totally intimidating, very menacing looking dude. I'm looking at him, and then the one guy's looking at that side, this guy's looking at me, and I made eye contact with him, I guess, for just too long. Because he jumped right in my face and started, fucking, what, you got a fucking problem with me, punk? And, and I'm just like, whoa, like, nobody told me about this.
Yeah,
like,
right.
What's going on? I'm not going to lie. I mean, the dude was very intimidating to me at that time in my life, especially not being around people like that. I'm just like, no, I don't have a problem, and I just remember he's like, yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't realize at the time that this guy was he was a somebody. You know what I mean? He was the one guy that you probably didn't want to piss off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As things would turn out, it was worse than that. So the pit starts, these guys come through, and, they were basically kind of like mugging everybody, just kind of like exerting, their dominance of the place. There was a group of about 15 skinheads, I'd say, that were like at the bar, you know, and then maybe like 5, 6 or 7 in the pit, probably. So the pit gets started, and I'm watching it. And, you know, mind you, I've never even seen a mosh pit on TV or nothing. Like, this is my first experience doing this. And so I'm like getting my courage up, you know, to fucking get in there. Eric gets in there, and Eric's fucking going around, and I'm like, okay, Eric's not have to get in there. I'm not going to not get in the pit, you know. So finally, I get myself worked up enough to where I get in there. So I jump in, and like as soon as I step into the pit, I collide with this cluster of people, right? It hit pretty hard, you know. Didn't think nothing of it, you know. So I'm coming around, you know, just doing my best to copy everybody else. And as I'm coming around, the dude that got in my face, he's on his knees, and he's got blood pouring out of his fucking nose. And he's looking at me as I'm coming by. And fucking as I get closer to him, you know, he's fucking yelling at me. But the music's loud. You can't hear nothing. You can't hear what he's saying. But he's yelling at me, and he starts fucking... He's on his knees, and he's trying to fight me, right? And I'm just like, fuck, dude. Like, does he think that I did that? I didn't do that. Like, I didn't fucking have any recollection. I didn't know. I wasn't trying to hit him, but I guess he thinks I did. You know, I don't know. So I was just kind of playing. That was like playing dumb. Yeah. Just trying to ignore it and not deal with it as much as I. So I come back around again, and now he's up on his feet. And as I'm going by him, he's still yelling shit, fucking, and he's trying to kick me in the ass. I remember, which is like a disrespect like when you're in a mosh pit, you kick someone in the ass. It's like, you know, punking them kind of thing. At the time, I didn't know that, but you know, that's what he was doing. I'm just like, fuck, dude, you know. And then what happened was like the skinheads that were in the pit were just gunning for me and Eric. And they were just on us, and that whole set of that band. I mean, these guys were just fucking really going hard on us. But I didn't know I didn't know anything else going on, so I would just match what they were doing back. So the amount of aggression and force they were using, I would just give it back. Yeah. I didn't realize, you know, the gravity of the situation hadn't kicked in yet, because I was just unaware of what it really was. Because the guy that I hit and elbowed in the nose or whatever, you know, it turned out that he was like I said, he was like one of the main dudes. He's known to be a fucking, you know, just a fucking terrorist. He's not a nice guy. He's not the nice skinhead. He's the mean. And I remember by the end of that set, everybody, it was like, it reminded me of the movie, the original Rollerball with James Caan, and it's the last fucking game that he's playing, and everybody's dead, you know, except for him and 2 other guys from the other team, and like there's motorcycles are burning on the fucking, on the skating rink and shit, and you know, he's just got to get that ball in one last time. So it reminded me of that, because nobody was in the pit anymore. Everybody from the show, like the skinheads had terrorized everybody out of the pit. It was me and Eric and like these 2 other dudes that were like kind of like metal, like long haired, like punk rocker guys. And they were in there, and there was like 3 or 4 skinheads in there that were just fucking trying to punk us out of there. Yeah. But the thing was, we stayed to the very end. We didn't know at the time, but because we stayed in with those guys, that would be our ticket into the game. Yeah, right. Down the road, it wasn't, you know, a couple months later, that was why we were welcome, which was, you know, I had no idea. So what happened was we went and sat down, band's over, and I asked Eric, you know, who's playing next? And I don't remember who it was. It was a DRI show. The first band that we watched was Boneless Ones. And, but he was like, check it out. He's like, we have to leave before the end of the show. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because those dudes are going to jump us. The skinheads are going to jump us. And I'm just like, what? It's like, what do you mean? He's like the dude that you hit in the nose, he's like, that's so-and-so, and it's all bad. There's no way that we're not going to be able to get out of here without getting our asses beat. And I was like, dude, I said, so that those guys are like that? Like that, they're like a gang? Like they beat people up and fight and shit like that? And he's like, yeah, dude. Totally. He said, I'm like, because like black people to jump people, and Chicano people, you know, they jump people like in their gang fights and shit. Growing up, I never saw white guys jump anyone ever. Like, it just wasn't happening. That wasn't what they did. It just, the thought of like these guys jumping us was foreign to me. I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy, right? So I was like, well, let's just go. So let's get out. So we got out of there and nothing happened. I think it was about 2 weeks, maybe a couple weeks later, maybe 4, the Circle Jerks were going to play there. And we're going to, let's go. Because, I mean, it was fun. For the one band that I saw, itching to go again. But the thing is like at the time my head was already shaved at that show. Like it was the hair. I had long hair and then I just shaved it all off one night. And so I wasn't like thinking I was Skinhead. Like I said, that was the first time I ever saw Skinheads. We go to this Circle Jerk show. I was like, but I'm going to go as a Skinhead. You guys need to shave your heads and we just need to go as a Skinhead gang. I was like, because those guys, I said, all I knew is there's a group of white guys that are tough and they're a gang. It's a white gang. I mean, I had found my tribe as far as I was concerned.
Sure.
I was like, what are we doing? Like, I'm surprised that we're not already, why aren't we already Skinheads? Like I never knew, you never told me about these guys like that.
Yeah,
I mean, so I was like, that's us. That has our name written all over it. Like that's our destiny right there. So they all agreed. Eric was the first one. He had a long mohawk. Him and Warwick. So they all cut their hair, cut their mohawks. That was the birth of the Hayward Skinheads. Was right there.
Wow.
There was one skinhead that came before us. He wasn't a part of any gang or anything. So that was the official birth of the Hayward Skinheads when we went to the Circle Jerk show. And when we went to that show, it was crazy. There was like 150 Skinheads at that show at the Bay.
Holy shit.
It was packed. At that time in the Bay Area, there was hundreds of Skinheads. Like I remember going to that show, being on the bus, going through the city, and there were Skinheads all throughout that city, but all over the place, different gangs. I was like, this is kind of cool. I mean, that was a good call. You know what I mean? Yeah. We had all kinds of backup and shit.
So there you go. That's it. Part 1 of the interview with Jesse. Next week on part 2, it gets really interesting. He goes really in depth into much more about the skinhead movements, the Hayward Skins and Bay Area. So make sure you tune in for that one, same time next week. And hey, if you want to keep seeing more videos like this, as always, feel free to give the video a big like, subscribe down below and hit the little bell to get notified. And if you want to support the channel in other ways, you can do that. You can buy me a coffee, donations, all the good stuff. All the links are in the description below. But I will see you next week for part 2. Thank you so much for being here. Stay safe, peace out, and love and light to you.